Today I'd like to analyze a game by Alexander Morozevich that was played almost 20 years ago, but it shows his quite original style and his determination to play for attack. The game was played against another very sharp attacking player, Polgar. So Morozevich was playing with the white pieces, and he played the Rossolimo line in the Sicilian defense with white, which is characterized by development of the bishop to b5. At that time, this was a fairly rare line, and Morozevich was one of the few players who worked to make it popular. Recently, last year in 2012 World Championship match, the line was quite popular. It was played in several games, and Black was struggling to equalize in that line. But anyway, that game went with e6. Sorry. Um, and after these moves, the play resembles somewhat the Spanish opening, in the sense that Black has been forced to play his hand on the queen side and advance the pawns, somewhat weakening the structure. And the difference, however, is that well, if White goes a4, then it becomes a bit more like the Spanish opening. But in this game, Morozevich gains the center and well, gains the space in the center and on the king side with pawn to e5, and this pawn will become, you know, pretty important later on. It, because Black does not want White to shut down the center with d4, Black plays d4 himself. Um, that has advantages such as the Black Knight, um, sorry, would be able to hop to d5, but that also means that the White Bishop has now a newly available square on e4. And this is a really good square for the bishop. From here, it's looking both on the king side, sorry, on the queen side and on the king side, and that's pretty nice. But for now, White exchanges on d4 and stabilizes the bishop with pawn to d3. Black supports the pawn on d4 with the queen move, and now White develops the rook to also indirectly support the e5 pawn. And also, as we will see, this frees up the square on f1 for the knight maneuver. So that's a useful move. Rook c8, occupying an open file. a3, possibly preventing b4 or knight b4. I guess, yeah, it's probably knight b4. Here, White has to figure out how to continue the attack, the expansion, and before moving his knight from b1 to f1 to possibly the king side, Morozevich gains space with h4. This important pawn move, is helpful because once the pawn advances to h5, it will be able um, to give White some extra squares. For that reason, Polgar stops h5 with g6, and this also prepares possibly development of the bishop to g7. White finishes development with developing the bishop and the knight. Black castles, and that really sets the you know that kind of determines the plans of both sides. Black has castled king side, where White has more space and most of the pieces, and it's a brave decision because all this means that Black will have to survive a pretty strong king side attack. But of course, it takes a lot of skill from White to conduct the attack properly. Um, so after knight f1, Black plays rook e8, freeing up f8 square. Um, Here Morozevich goes knight to 1 to h2. While he could have gone to g3, but that would have really limited his options. Instead, he transfers the knight to g4 square, um, which is more important. Uh, black Black slowly starts to drift here into a position where he just falls under an attack. So now White is creating threats. This knight here is coming both to h6 and to f8, and this really highlights that the previous move was maybe not the best, but that also reveals the purpose of Black's last move, which is he freed up the g8 square for the knight, and he was hoping to hold things together like this. But um, there was something that black did not really expect, and that was that white has such a strong control over the center that he can throw more pieces at the kingside attack, and that's exactly what Morozevich does. He goes knight to g5, and he could have instead played something like queen to d2 and just build up the pressure slowly, but instead he just goes for the kill. And his hope is that if black takes, well, then he takes back, and then he has a plan of transferring the queen to h3, and then that king will be boxed in the corner there. So, um, so black can try to defend, and in addition to the transfer of the queen to h3, white also has a strong plan of putting the knight on f6, just boxing the black king further. And these pieces on the queen side, they're becoming really useless after this kind of onslaught. Um, and so, for example, the game could continue like this, and black really doesn't have enough pieces to defend the king, and dark squares are really falling apart. And the plan really is to chop on f5 and then to put the bishop on g7, and it falls. Things fall into place pretty nicely. Up a piece, black is gonna get mated. So for that reason, Polgar did not accept the sacrifice, and instead she just tried to survive and hold on. But Morozevich just throws in more wood into the fire with pawn to h5. Sorry, and that just opens up the king even further. Um, and now probably the last mistake with queen d8. Now black just falls apart because Morozevich takes, um, well, takes on g5, and now after queen f3, the white pieces are coming to the king side with decisive effect. There's really no good defense against this. Black tried to block the h file, but white just took it. And there's a lot of moves black can play, but none of them really defend well against the white attack. Now the king tries to escape from the h file. Um, and now this knight comes back to f6, and now queen h7 is being threatened, which is really unpleasant. Trying to block the h file with the rook does not work because black has further weaknesses here in the center, such as on e6. Black hopes to exchange the bishops, but that doesn't really make a big difference. Now white is also putting more pressure on the c file, and here probably in time trouble, Polgar played rook to c7, but she realized that white is just gonna take on c7 and then win a queen like this. So really just a one-sided game from Morozevich, but it took several interesting moves from him, like h4, knight 1 to h2, and then finally knight to g5, just not waiting around and just attacking the black king as soon as possible with all his pieces. The concentration of the white pieces here on the king side is very impressive, very impressive. Um, and there may be no exact calculation involved down to every branch of the variations, but just a general intuitive feeling that with so many pieces on the king side, this has to work, and this assessment has proved correct even after some further analysis. So overall, a great game from Morozevich.